Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Windy City Breakdown. Tony and Jackie here, joined by Andy Martinez and Kyle Milenovich as always. We have a special guest in this podcast, Meghan Montemurro, the Cubs beat writer for the Chicago Tribune. First of all, Meghan, thanks for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
I'm honored.
You are our first guest, so you should be very honored.
I
How
told Tony as soon as you reached out and you were the first one, we're like, choose our first guest. Like that settles it for us.
I mean, loyalty pays off.
There we go.
That's true.
Exactly.
The prize you get is you have to talk to us for the next 20 minutes or so.
I'll handle it.
All right. How are things going so far in Arizona? I mean, first full squad workout was a couple days ago. Been down there for about a week or so since pitchers and catchers reported. Any initial kind of impressions, thoughts on Cubs so far?
Yeah, I mean, I know this is going to sound kind of lame because, winter is so long and everyone looks forward to the baseball season. But I think the biggest thing is it's kind of just been boring, which I think for the Cubs is a good thing because pretty much most of their team is coming back. Obviously, the biggest question marks are what the bullpen's going to look like. But even with that, they made a lot of signings in the offseason where maybe there's only one or two spots up for grabs anyway. And then you look at the starting lineup, that's pretty well configured. And so there's maybe one or two bench spots that they need to figure out what that looks like. I think the most notable thing, I think, just talking to different guys was the focus of the work. Like, Jameson Tyone was talking about how even just the vibe a few days in, it's not like a rah-rah vibe, like, we can do it, we can get to the playoffs. Like, last year was we want to end this drought. We're a playoff team. We've been close the last couple of years. And this year it's, we're expecting a deep run into October and, be one of the last teams, if not the last team standing. And so I think everything's just very more focused. It's very clear what the goal they're working towards is and that they feel obviously it's very attainable. So I think it's been pretty straightforward right now. I think maybe it'll start to feel a smidge different later next week when, all the WBC guys will have left camp for the start of that. So, but I think for now, it's just a group that knows that they need to put in the daily work to get where they want to be by the end of the season.
I'm curious, like with everything kind of set, like where does that kind of leave someone like a Matt Shaw? Like I know there's been talk about the outfield, but like where have you seen him working the most? What have you seen him doing, and where does that? Because I feel like that's kind of the one. I'll say like odd piece with the starting rotation that's kind of left over.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Shaw, the biggest thing is he just needs to be prepared to pretty much play anywhere. I mean, he's getting work at, second, short, third, outfield. I think right field probably makes the most sense to initially ease him in just because, you have Seo who obviously can DH. So if you want to give him a day off his feet. But I mean, I would fully expect to see him get reps potentially in all three outfield spots. Obviously, he'll have some time in camp to get acclimated out in right field while, Seya's playing in the WBC. But really, I mean, they just kind of view him as a guy that can play all over. And, if there are injuries, you have someone who had a lot of experience last year and knowing what it takes to play every day. So really, he's a guy that you could just see him kind of plugging all over. And I think these next few weeks will be important for him, for, the coaching staff to gauge how comfortable is he really out there. And, does he have, the amount of reps where they would feel comfortable using him out in the outfield with somewhat regularity if needed.
Meghan, I'm curious. We've heard, obviously the big addition for the Cubs this offseason is Alex Bregman, and we've heard so much about his intangibles, his leadership. A couple days in, has he already won over the entire clubhouse, and they're going to put a C on his chest and, go against like Cubs history. Like, obviously that's an extreme, but like, have you seen anything? What have your first impressions been of Bregman so far? And this kind of off-field stuff, how that might blend the intangibles with his like on-field skill set, and just general like experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk to some of his teammates so far, I mean, obviously it's only been a week or so where some of them have been around him, but they talk a lot about just the edge and intensity he brings, like the expectation of winning and, the standard, he believes should be set. And, Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think, and this isn't a knock on Kyle Tucker, but as you guys saw last year, like he's not a guy that hits on the field much. Like during spring, I remember Craig Counsell telling us last spring, like you're probably not going to see him out here very much because all of his work is so cage oriented, and that's not the case with Alex Bregman. I mean, he's been hitting live BP. He's on the field just for regular BP. I mean, watching him in lives, I mean, he looks ready to go play in a game right now. I mean, he has just been smoking the ball. He's hit a couple of home runs. So it's been really impressive just watching him and the consistency. And that's something that Pete Crow Armstrong was raving about, just like the consistency in his work and in his swing, and he knows what he wants to be accomplishing every time, and just his understanding of the strike zone. So yeah, it's been really interesting just seeing kind of like how he attacks work on a day-to-day basis within the structure of camp. And obviously, it's been encouraging reviews so far.
You mentioned the on-field work and the vast disparity of like what it was with Kyle Tucker, but like I'm curious, like, do you feel because like some of the numbers that have shown with ballpark factor and things like that, how much better it is for right-handed hitters? Like, do you think that will play to his advantage at Wrigley Field compared to like where Kyle Tucker was? I mean, we saw some of the frustrations last year, right?
Mhm.
Where like he was smoking these balls that you think are a home run and would be a home run in a lot of other ballparks, and they were nestling into the glove of outfielders. Like, do you think like that might benefit him and might benefit the Cubs overall as an offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to visualize how many doubles Bregman could hit, in that left center field gap. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see, how his swing ultimately ends up playing. Like obviously they looked into that and did the maps where you can like overlay what are hits at Wrigley versus Fenway or in Houston, and like sometimes it's like, oh, how much does that really matter? And then you see a guy like Isaac Paredes where like those maps made it look like he was really going to struggle at Wrigley with the dimensions, the way how the ballpark plays, and then even though it was a
Right.
really obviously small sample size, like that's how it kind of bore out. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and I just think like, just his overall approach, and he's not afraid to go to the opposite field. And that's the kind of stuff that should play no matter the condition. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm more curious to see kind of how the home run totals look. And you know, if his swing, if he is able to take advantage of that right center field area.
All right, Megan. It's February 17th, so we want to get all of your predictions for the 2026 Cubs season right now. It's actually kind of crazy. I was looking at the calendar earlier. I mean, opening day is just over 5 weeks away, which is kind of nuts. It feels like it'll be on us before we know it, especially with the WBC adding
Mhm.
craziness into spring training down in Arizona with you all. But I'm curious too. You talked about like the roster's pretty much set. There aren't a ton of position battles, but either from spring or what you've seen already or otherwise, are there under the radar players that you think fans should keep an eye on for the Cubs this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, and I don't know if this counts as under the radar because I don't know how many under the radar guys they truly have right now, even on a prospect side. But like, I don't think Shota Imanaga should be overlooked after last season. I don't know if that counts as under the radar, but I
Sure.
think I think what he showed, or the numbers that he put up after the hamstring injury obviously impacted. He was clearly not 100%, mechanically after dealing with the hamstring strain for 7 weeks. And so, I feel like I saw on social media some fans lamenting that he accepted, the 22 plus million qualifying offer for a season. But like, the Cubs are very excited that he's back. Tommy Hotovy is stoked. Craig Counsell is very confident that they're getting the version pre-injury. And I think, this is obviously a guy who is always very motivated to be at his best. And so, talking to Tommy Hotovy the other day, just like what they envision this version of Shota looking like this year. He talked about they're working to add a cutter back into his pitch mix. They want to tweak the sinker grip so maybe he can get a little bit more velocity difference between that and his fastball. They talked about, adjusting off speed stuff. So like, I mean, I think he's just an under the radar guy in the sense of like I don't think he's going to be pitching like he did in the postseason and at the end of the season. And if that's the case, if he's more like the rest of the first half, his rookie year version, that would be huge for them.
I'd count that as under the radar. I think so many
Yeah.
fans have that are like thinking of him of like, oh no, this guy is like you said, going to be the guy from October. So I appreciate that. I count that as under the radar. Just want the record to show. What's going to be the biggest surprise for the Cubs, or who's going to be the biggest surprise? Who are fans going to be looking at and being like, wow, at the end of the season?
I mean, this kind of I didn't know if I wanted to go with this one because I know we talked about, like prospect to watch kind of thing, but I think Jackson Wiggins will factor in at some point by the end of the year. I don't think it's fair to think he'll have the same sort of impact Cade Horton had last year. But I think he's a really interesting arm that could pop for them at some point in the second half. Tommy Hodby was saying that like one difference, in comparing his, trajectory to Cade Horton's is, he feels like he needs a little bit more time in AAA to get acclimated, but that, he started working in the off season with the Major League Baseball, and started getting used to that. And so I think that's a really interesting piece that they could have at their disposal, in the second half if things go well in the first half, or if can be efficient, if he can, keep the walk rate down and throw enough strikes. I think he's a guy that can emerge for them in the second half because, and inevitably there's going to be injuries. It feels like on the pitching side there always is in particular. And so he's a guy, if the timeline works out well, could be an interesting name to watch.
Yeah, I mean, that's never a bad thing if it is a team in the playoff hunt to add a guy with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball into the bullpen or whatever role he ends up taking. But I'm curious too, and maybe Wiggins is the answer for this, Megan, but like, who is your Cubs breakout player to watch this year? Not necessarily taking like that
Mhm.
PCA, Pete Armstrong, like MVP level that we saw last year in a true breakout. And it is a roster with no commodities, but is there anybody that stands out that you think can take a pretty big leap this year?
I mean, I think one name that's really interesting, which I don't know if he'll get enough playing time to really maybe qualify as a breakout, but I think Miguel Amaya. Last year when he was healthy and playing, I mean, he really looked like he took a step forward, from where he had been in 2024. I mean, just offensively with the power. I mean, obviously him and Carson Kelly is that 1-2 punch, for the first month and a half, 2 months was obviously a big part of their success, but he's a really interesting player for them and they really kind of need him to play so they can kind of figure out how he fits into their future, or if not, because Carson Kelly could be gone after the season, and Ballesteros, unclear if he'll be able to have his catching development get advanced to the point where he can be a regular behind the plate. And so I think this is a really important potential breakout season for Miguel Amaya, not only for what he can bring to the Cubs this season, but also just answering some long-term questions at the catcher position for them.
I want to put you on the spot here on this. This is the next one with what's your bold prediction for the Cubs? Like, what do you think? Just if it's crazy, if it's out of the box, like what's your bold prediction for the Cubs this year?
I mean, obviously I think the bold prediction would have to be they make it to the World Series. I mean, I I am not sure they'll stay healthy enough, and I think there's some players that are set up to regress from last year offensively that if that happens, I don't know if they make up enough offense at other positions to be the kind of threat that they were for most of last year. But I mean, just when you look at the pitching, I mean, Jameson Taillon could be like their number 4, number 5 starter, and he made a huge start for them in the playoffs and shoved when they needed him most. And so, like, they have some depth in starting pitching if they can get there and get them and get there with them healthy. And so I think they have the offensive upside again to be able to go toe to toe with a lot of teams. Obviously, the bullpen is a big question mark. Who knows what that'll look like by the end of the year, either. But I think if you're going bold prediction, I mean, I think it would be getting to the World Series.
Megan, just to take a quick time out maybe from the predictions, but you mentioned the starting staff, and I think we'd be remiss to have you on and not ask for an update on Justin Steele and how things are going there. I know there's not a huge timeline out there, but what has been the general vibe and overall thoughts on Steele in camp as he recovers from that elbow surgery?
Yeah, I mean, it's all been really encouraging. Steele has said how great he's been feeling. He hasn't experienced any sort of setbacks with his elbow, which is obviously, always the biggest concern as you keep ramping up that something might pop up or, you're not bouncing back as well after throwing. But I mean, he's been throwing his, bullpens on schedule. It doesn't sound like he's throwing his full pitch mix quite yet, but he's, regularly on schedule. He participates in PFPs. And so I would say that, that's all really encouraging signs. I mean, the Cubs have been super cautious of not giving any sort of real time frame of when he could be back, but like mid to late May feels realistic right now. It'll be interesting to see if by the start of the season if they put him on the 60-day IL or not, because that'll obviously inform a timeline a little bit more clearly. But yeah, I mean, it seems like mid-May could be in play, which would be obviously huge for them.
Yeah, you mentioned too, just like you're not sure if they stay healthy in terms of like the World Series. I think that's a super fascinating storyline to watch all years because you look at last year, and I think it was Craig or Jed, last week initially mentioned how remarkably healthy they were on the position player front last year, and you figure just by luck that may not carry over to this year. But on the other hand, they were maybe like pitching is always hard to predict, but they were pretty unlucky, I would say, in the injury department and pitching last year, especially with the starters. When Steele goes down early in April, you lose him for the whole year. Tyone was out for stretches. Shota Imanaga was out for 2 months. Then Cade Horton, your best pitcher when you needed him the most, has this kind of mysterious rib injury, or not mysterious, but freak rib injury, that comes from a cough. And yeah, so I don't know what to expect, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Megan. Like even pitching wise for like health, like it could be easy to say that the Cubs maybe are due for a little bit better luck in that, but also you have guys like Matthew Boyd and Edward Cabrera who have had long histories of injuries, and Boyd was healthy last year for really the first time in a half decade. Tyone's getting up there in age. Like Shota has had 2 years now where he's missed some time each time. Like what are your thoughts just on like the overall pitching health, and do they have enough depth to get to the World Series in that?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question and what they tried to address in the offseason. I mean, you have pretty much your starting rotation set, and then after that, obviously, you have Colin Ray, Javier Assad, Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown. Obviously, all those guys are capable of, throwing multiple innings, whether out of the bullpen, starting, maybe in the second half, Jackson Wiggins is part of that group. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting how they manage workloads. Like you said, Matthew Boyd, he said he's feeling great coming into spring, but I mean, obviously they're going to be tracking all the recovery data very closely to ensure that, these guys are recovering like they need to, trying to pick up obviously if there's any information data that might indicate, fatigue, which obviously makes you higher risk for injury. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and that's I think part of the Steele equation of when he returns. I mean, he's already told us that like he's been told by the surgeon that like he's going to be limited in his innings this year. How do you knowing that, like, how do you allocate those innings? Do you slow play it early and maybe don't bring him back the second he's feeling 100% ready to go? Do you give him a break, somewhere around the All-Star break and, give him build in extra rest? Do you skip starts? Because again, like his expectation is I'm pitching into October, and so managing all of that is going to be a really interesting piece as well. And like even guys like Cade Horton, I mean, he's going to take another innings jump. And so, I mean, I think the good thing for them is they had guys in Colin Ray and Javier Assad who have experience pitching multiple innings out of the bullpen. Even a guy like Ben Brown, who's shown he can do it, um, when there's an opener, or even, giving them length out of the pen. So I know they hope that they have enough starting pitching, and I think the season will reveal whether that is accurate enough, or as Jed always likes to say, you never feel like you have enough starting pitching.
Megan, I have a question, and this is from the peanut gallery over here. I'm lucky that they're letting me ask one. Uh, so say everything like perfect scenario, we're turning injuries off. When Justin Steele comes back and the rotation is say the rotation is fully healthy, do they go to a 6-man rotation? Who did they take somebody out? What do you think they'll do in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a scenario like that, like if everyone's healthy and there's no issues, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they did a 6-man for a little bit, given, obviously Boyd's injury, past his age, Tyone's age. I mean, I have to think like the entire rotation's not going to be rolling well at the same time. So maybe it's an opportunity to give a guy a break, whether you skip a start, move a guy to the bullpen. I think the Cubs would love to have that problem of figuring out how to add Justin Steele to a rolling rotation, but that would be a very good problem to have. Yeah, I don't think there's an obvious answer because all those guys you would want to be starting, and
Yeah.
I don't think it would be beneficial to like send Cade to AAA. Like, you want all those bullets to be used in the majors.
You, going on the starting pitching front, if everything goes perfect in spring training, I guess again in this situation, who is the opening day starter? Like I know Craig kind of surprised everyone when he said last week at the opening press conference that Palencia would be his guy in the ninth inning if there was a game today. I
Mhm.
assume he didn't reveal anything about opening day, but like who do you think is in line to potentially start that opening day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, they've talked before that like you can't really put much stock into spring performances unless I guess maybe it's completely terrible or incredibly amazing. I mean, I feel like the two maybe most obvious, or okay, I should say three. I would say like maybe the three probably most obvious ones would be Matthew Boyd, Cade Horton, Shota Imanaga. I would not be surprised if it's some combination of those three getting the ball the opening series against Washington. Maybe you go Matthew Boyd because he's gonna have pitched in the World Baseball Classic. Obviously, those things are very scripted, and so it's not going to likely be a normal, 5+ inning start, but he might be a little further along, and you can roll him out. You have the off day after opening day, weather pending. So yeah, I mean, I think you can make an argument for any of those. I would think he might defer to someone just with more experience than Cade, but I mean, Cade was looking amazing and and throwing live BP the other day. I mean, he was like sitting mid 90s and hitting 98. And so they're also trying to make sure he's not going out too fast, and like, it's still a long spring, and they definitely want to rein that in a little bit, but that's obviously a really good sign. Just health wise, and seeing him come in and posting that number. So I guess if you're looking for a prediction, I might just go Matthew Boyd as like the veteran guy. He would have pitched in the WBC, and probably would be ready to go.
While we're talking pitching, who do you think will be the Cubs Cy Young in 2026? And you don't have to do, like voting in BBWA
Yeah.
is obviously so heavy in Cy Young on starting pitchers. You can choose a reliever. Like last year, Brad Keller would have made a pretty good case alongside Boyd and Horton. Do you have a pick for this year?
I mean, just like it's hard to not pick Cade Horton with how good his stuff is. And I mean, like what he was doing last year, like he wasn't even worrying about getting swing and miss. Like he basically was just throwing it and saying hit it, and they weren't. Um, so I don't know if that's a bold prediction. I do think like the health thing is a very real question mark for him. I think it's one of those things that it will kind of be there until he does it. And that's maybe when the question mark goes away about health. But yeah, I think he just is really going to take another step forward. The way he talked and reacted, with the work he put in after that start in Houston where he got rocked, I think really showed a lot about who he is mentally as a pitcher, and his ability to bounce back from a really bad outing and use that as a positive. So I think I'm gonna go Cade Horton because I think he's one of the probably the bigger wild cards coming off a rookie season that he had. And so for the Cubs to get where they want to be, like Cade Horton has to be good. And so um, I think he's gonna live up to the standard that he expects of himself and what he showed last year.
We've been talking a lot of pitching, and it came up in my mind when you were talking about the starting pitch or the opening day candidates because you mentioned 3 names, and I thought one of them was going to be like the main one of their main offseason additions in Edward Cabrera. We haven't mentioned
Mhm.
him at all so far. What have you seen from him? What give us a like a little scouting report, I guess, or like what have you seen from him in your time down in Arizona?
Yeah, he threw live BP today for the first time, and yeah, maybe I'm not putting enough acknowledgement in how good he can be. I mean, I think he again is probably the one that has the biggest question marks health wise, just over the last few years, and part of that, of not including him in that trio is just like I'm curious of like how cautious they will be initially. And because council was telling us since we've been down here, just like they want to make sure he takes his time getting acclimated to a new organization. I mean, he'd been with in Miami's organization for like 12 years or something, basically since he signed as an amateur international free agent. And so, they want to be deliberate in helping, him transition and, identify ways that they feel like he can get better and take that next step. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how they use him because um in terms of just like how cautious they are with his schedule and his build up process. He threw a bullpen maybe like a day or two before the live BP, and he wasn't fully letting it rip. So I think they're just being very very deliberate in the transition. And so I'm curious to see just like are they able to bring more out of his four seam fastball? That's not a pitch despite the velocity he can generate with it. It's not a pitch that's always super successful for him. um Council was saying today actually that like it almost can be viewed as like his fourth pitch, which is usually pretty rare when you're looking at a starting pitcher. So it's going to be interesting to see what his pitch mix looks like for them. And yeah, I mean maybe I should have included him in the trio or for the first series, but I do think that like they're just trying to really um yeah, integrate him into the organization and not throw too much at him at once with different voices.
I mean, I think that makes sense. Like, I think the first series and opening day is largely ceremonial anyway. I mean, as you said, like it's really about like who's ready. And Shota started opening day last year, and obviously, even after getting hurt, he was probably not considered their ace for the last like 4 months of the season. So, I think that makes sense. But it's also I was laughing as you were talking about Edward Cabrera throws, can touch 100, and that fact that his fastball is like his fourth pitch. I get it and it makes sense, but it's just crazy the day and age we are in pitching and how different it is from a decade ago or 20 years ago where like somebody was throwing 100, it was just so nuts. It's just kind of funny, like laughing and thinking about that. But all right, back to predictions, Megan. Who will be the Cubs MVP 2026?
I mean, maybe this feels like an obvious choice, but I mean, what he brings defensively alone, you could probably make an argument. But I mean, I think Pete Armstrong. I mean, what he showed last year, obviously he tailed off offensively those last, 2.5 months. But like at the All-Star break, you can make an argument he was number two, in
Yeah.
MVP voting behind Shohei. And so I think for him, it's going to be really interesting. Can he tap into more of the first half version offensively than kind of what happened in the final 2 months? But I think for the Cubs, like if they're going to be one of the best teams in baseball, Pete has to be kind of driving the bus on that, just with all the different ways he can impact the game. So he's going to be my pick.
What series on the 2026 schedule are you circling or do you have pinned and are anticipating the most?
I think their first series back in Milwaukee. I think that will. I mean, it's been a good vibe there, entertaining, energetic. Since Craig has come in. But I think it's going to go to potentially another level when they play there at the end of June. It's a weekend series. Even though obviously the Brewers didn't do much against the Dodgers, they still ended the Cubs season. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll be really entertaining, and both teams are motivated to play well.
Yeah, I mean, I love a good rivalry, and like you said, they ended the season, but also the way they did it, and some of the quotes and stuff along the way, but parting with the L flag on the
Yeah.
field afterwards, and between that and like the Bears Packers thing, I feel like it's like
Mhm.
this Chicago, Wisconsin rivalry is like at its height, at its peak right now. So I'm looking forward to that one too. All right, last thing, Megan, before we let you go, prediction wise, you talked about Cubs, potentially making it to the World Series as your bold prediction. How many wins do you think they end up with? We saw, some of the projection models for 91. They won 92 last year. Where is the Megan projection model?
Yeah, so it's tough because I was really like thinking it over. They finished with 92 wins, but it really felt like those last 2 months they weren't playing necessarily all that great. I think I'm gonna go with 90. I think there might be a little bit more parity in the National League. I don't think, in theory, like looking at the teams, like maybe the Pirates and Reds aren't as bad. Obviously, I think the Reds were in the wild card at the end there, but I think maybe some of the floor has been raised a little bit. So I'm putting them at around 90. I mean, I think there's a very realistic possibility, and as Tom Ricketts told us the other day, like they should win the division. I just personally think that you can't count out the Brewers until they've been conquered, and so um, but I think 90 obviously would get the job done and get them in the postseason, which is ultimately step one. So I think they're gonna be right around 90 wins.
Uh,
All right, well,
I was
yeah,
gonna say real
Megan,
quick.
go ahead,
I
Hayden.
was gonna say real quick, Tony. We have this fun thing. Kyle is really, really great with dates. Like, I want you to give him a date and see if he can give you like something that had happened on this date in Chicago sports, and see if we
Okay.
can like. I want to put this on the test. So give him a date.
All
But
right.
before you do, so
I
you'll
will.
Megan, you'll ask it. I need like 30 seconds. I'm like Rain Man. I just need to
Okay.
my brain just needs
30
to calibrate
seconds.
it.
Okay.
So
All
you
right.
guys can
All
ask
right.
the
You ready?
question after it, and I'll just sit here and like my brain just surfaces through data.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Let's do March 31st.
Okay. Oh, that's an easy one. 2003. That was opening day. Corey Patterson hit 2 homers,
What
7
happened on opening
RBIs.
day
Cubs won
2000?
15-2 against the Mets. I'm looking that up
Oh
now.
my God, yeah. I just looked it up. Yeah.
Nailed it. Well,
That
Megan,
is
some of the
impressive. That's impressive. I hope you crush it at trivia nights.
he
It's
does.
literally
When we
all I'm
asked
good
him this
for.
on the first yeah, we asked him on the first podcast, and Andy and I both gave him dates, and he completely
He was
forgot
wrong on all of them.
anything that happened.
I'm not used to being on the mic. I'm used to being behind the scenes. I got starstruck.
All right, well, you're 1 for 3 now, Kyle. So that's a 333 average. So you'd be
Hall
a
of
Hall of
Famer.
Famer, but
Yep.
and an All Star. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Megan, thanks so much. We really appreciate you hopping on, and have fun down in Arizona. Say hi to Scotty C for us.
I will definitely make sure to do that.
All right, that was a really fun conversation with Megan. I'm glad that she was able to join us and provide some insights on from Mesa on the Cubs camp so far. But one thing I wanted to talk through with you guys is just I like the point that Megan made, and I agree 100% that while everybody on paper around the game and the media and the Cubs organization maybe even feel like the Cubs should be clear favorites to win the NL Central, and they probably are, and I mean I think they are too, and there's a sizable gap between the Cubs and the Brewers, and the Brewers traded away Freddie Peralta, and they on paper they look like teams that could possibly be pretty far apart. But I like Megan said, I mean, I think you can't really crown the Cubs until they do it, and they have to supplant the Brewers, and I've been counting the Brewers out for years, and have won back to back NL Central champs. So, like they're just always right in there, even when I think they're not. So, but Kyle, what's the win total projected for next year for Brewers Cubs?
So the Cubs over under for their win total is 88.5. And for the Brewers, it's 84.5. The Brewers have their odds to win the World Series are plus 3,000, and the Cubs are nearly half that, tied for the seventh best at plus 1,700.
Yeah, like that. If you're a betting person, like if you're gambling on over or under win totals, I feel like just out of principle you have to take the Brewers number just because they continuously do it. And I think one of the things that their organization does so well is just how often they strike gold on those roster moves on the edges. I think back to like they get someone like Quinn Priester, who was a former first round pick, kind of become a kind of like a journeyman pitcher, and he becomes this great pitcher that was pitching big innings for them and was arguably one of their best starters. And I look at the Caleb Durbin trade that they just made a week or two ago, where they sent Caleb Durbin to Boston, and he was a key guy. He was their third baseman in the playoff run. I just again, on principle, I have to say, like, they won that trade. The three guys they got back, I'm not even sure too much about them, but like, I just feel like they won that trade, and they probably won the Freddie Peralta trade too, just because they were so good at making those kinds of deals that makes them a force that you can't discredit, whether or not they're trading away Corbin Burns or Freddie Peralta or whomever year after year.
Kyle, I mean, what's your take on this? Like, you say if you're a betting man, but I know that you are a betting man. So, are you betting Cubs to win? You know, to go over the 88. But like, how would you bet on the Brewers next year if you could, or this year, coming year?
I'd bet the over on both. I don't think, and it's exactly what I mean. I'm agreeing with every single thing you guys are saying now, and what Megan was saying before is that like the Brewers are like they're just like a cockroach that you just can't kill. Like the Cubs apparently can't kill. You know what I mean? Like they're just always freaking there. It is the most annoying thing. They have the likes of Joey Ortiz, formerly Caleb Durbin, right? They have Blake Perkins. I'm trying to think who else. Like they have these guys that
Isaac
aren't
Collins.
Isaac Collins, yeah, that guy. Didn't he hit a big home run against Shota this season? I swear he hit like a massive home run against Shota. I mean, then
I think, yeah, I think he had like a big 3-run shot. He was traded away too, by the way, in a much quieter move this offseason.
was he actually?
Yeah,
Fuck me. Like look at what Andrew Vaughn did when he got traded there, right? Like he was essentially living up to his top 5, top 10 draft pick status. They just have a way to always be in the mix. They honestly, I mean, you have to tip your hat to them. They're a very well run organization. 84.5 wins. I would think you're betting the over of that. I think it's one of those like it's neck. What was their? How many games did they win last year? 97. I think that the Cubs lost the division by 5 games.
yeah.
Are they 13 losses or 13 games worse than they were last year? I know they lost Freddie Peralta, but I don't think they are. To be honest, as much as I hate to say it, that's probably one I will bet the over.
Yeah, probably. And Andrew Vaughn hit a big home run off Shota Imanaga last year too, by the way.
We don't. Yeah, I know. Trust me. There's a reason I didn't mention that. I know.
All right. Well, I guess honestly, quite a few people in September and October hit some big home runs off him. But all right, before we wrap this whole pod, we'll get into the routine that we've gotten on here. That we like to just talk about what's going on around sports, whether it's baseball or other sports that have kind of caught our eye. And so when we were talking about this before we started recording, Kyle had kind of a fun answer. So Kyle, we're going to give you the stage right now. What are you watching sports-wise that is at Cubs right now?
Yeah, so and it's in a roundabout way Cubs related because Mike Napoli was he was the first base coach. He was with their organization for 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4 years.
I think 4, yeah.
But I'm watching highlights on YouTube as I always do. But I was watching the 2011 World Series, and you guys may remember obviously Game 6. David Freese ties it with a triple in the 9th. Wins it with a 2-run shot in the 11th. Cardinals go on to win that game, win Game 7, obviously win the World Series. Napoli was on that 2011 Rangers team, but he obviously was also on the 2016 Indians team that blew a 3-1 lead to the Cubs. There's no like real follow-up besides the fact that he was an integral part, a starting player on each of those 2 World Series teams. They had both of those teams at some point had to have had like a 90+% chance to win the World Series and inevitably lost. Granted, he won the World Series in 2013 with the Red Sox, so he does have his ring. But can you imagine if he didn't have that 2013 ring? Just the heartbreak and the agony that Napoli would be going through. This isn't even something I thought of before we just started mentioning it before the podcast started. Like, I would be devastated. I would be devastated for him, but if I were him, I would, honest to God, I think I'd stop watching baseball. I'd be like, fuck this.
I mean, yeah, like those are 2 like historic losses in the World Series. Like that, the 2016 one, obviously, most people listening here are Cubs fans, or I'd venture a lot of 99% of the fans listening are Cubs fans and remember that one. But like 2011, I mean, the triple should have been caught, right? Like that was a ball that should have been caught by Nelson Cruz. And
Yeah.
the Mike Napoli has two rings, and who knows, maybe the Rangers. Like so many things could transpire differently. But that's like, you're right. That is devastating.
Andy, what are you paying attention to your sports in the rest of
Um,
worldwide
I'm
wide of sports?
Kyle would be proud of me. I've been watching a lot of Olympic hockey, and maybe it's just because it's like the national teams or anything. We're recording this Tuesday night for full transparency, and the U.S. plays tomorrow in the quarterfinals against Sweden.
Big game.
I think that I'm excited. I'm excited to watch that game. Like I've been all in. My wife and I watched Kim and I watched Miracle. It was the first time she had watched it. So it
Great
was like
movie.
it's like I'm all in on Olympic hockey, and it's so much fun. I've been glued to Olympic hockey.
Yeah, we so actually, I'm still covering for those of you that don't know, covering the Olympics for NBC in Connecticut, and all of my coworkers, and of course I've been involved in that too. There's a card shop in the building that we're in that's attached to like the NBC offices, and so they have like Olympic card boxes. So it's become a whole thing with like the 20, 25 people that work in the digital department that everybody's like ripping packs every day. And I just keep trying to get somebody from the 1980 team, hockey team, and I haven't been able to yet, but I've been pretty close to getting Mike Eruzione a couple of times. Looking forward to it. It hasn't happened yet, but hoping.
How about this fun fact? USA Hockey, they've won 2 gold medals, 1960 and 1980. On the 1960 team, I believe his name was Bill Christian. In 1980, there was a guy named Dave Christian. And now there's a relative of those two on the 2026 Olympic team, Brock Nelson. So if there's a little symmetry, maybe some fate, I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know what the exact relation. I think it was an uncle, maybe a grandfather in 1960, but I'm keeping an eye out on that. Just saying. Just saying.
That's a good story for sure. I mean, again, like you said, we're recording before they played, but it feels like they're kind of destined to be in the gold medal game against Canada. So
Knock on
yeah,
wood.
I'm curious about that, but we'll see. I think I've the Olympics still is kind of my answer. I think this is like maybe 3 weeks in a row, 3 episodes in a row I've answered this, but I just, it's so cool. There's always so many like emotional stories. It's the hockey team has been great. And, even like the women's hockey team is just steamrolling everybody. I mean, 5 straight shutouts at this point has been nuts. You handed Canada its first ever shutout loss in the Olympics, which is crazy. But to me, it was Alana Myers Taylor,
Yes.
the bobsledder. That was incredible. I mean,
Yes.
she's back for her 5th and final Olympics. She's 41. She's a mom of 2. Both kids have disabilities. And to see her finally win gold for the first time, and she's already the most decorated bobsledder in U.S. history. That gold is just kind of icing on the cake. But what I loved more than anything was just like the emotion. And I watched it again today, and I was almost like tearing up. Was like the emotion of her winning and celebrating and hugging her nanny, and her kids are right there and hugging her kids, and then signing to her kids. Both her kids are deaf, and just how happy she was, and just seeing the joy in her face is like, I don't know. It's just awesome. It gets me like every time. And like, that's part of why I love the movie Miracle and all this other stuff is like, when you have these moments, it's just like reminds you like just it's so much bigger than sports and it's bigger than like individuals, but it's just so cool.
When the medal ceremony was going on and the son was like pointing to like there's mom, and then the dad's like,
man.
mom's coming. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I heard the one of her sons, Noah, it keeps signing like Noah Champion because they kept signing champion to her. Yeah, no, so it's fantastic. There's so many cool stories. Hoping that both U.S. hockey teams, men's and women's, end up with gold, but we'll see. We'll address on the next podcast because by the time we record again, we will find out whether the U.S. men's and women's hockey teams have gold. For Kyle and Andy, I'm Tony, and for Megan as well. We thank her for stopping by, but thanks to you all for tuning in, for watching, listening, however you're consuming our podcast. Make sure that you follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. We also have a link tree set up as well, and follow us on social media. But thanks as always for tuning in. This has been the Windy City Break.